I didn't realize the world had stopped until I looked away. I was sitting at my desk long past midnight, the room lit only by my monitor, half listening to a Discord call while I strip-mined in silence. Normal Minecraft stuff. Stone, coal, the soft crackle of lava somewhere below. I'd played this game for years, enough that my hands moved without thinking, enough that it felt safer than being alone with my thoughts. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced down for barely a second, a stupid reflex, and that's when the air changed. When I looked back, my character wasn't moving. The pickaxe was frozen mid-swing. The torch flame was locked in place, every pixel perfectly still. No animation, no particles, but the sound didn't stop. Gravel crunched somewhere behind me. Water dripped. A faint, careful step echoed through the tunnel. At first I laughed, because lag happens. Everyone knows that. But lag doesn't behave. Lag doesn't wait. It doesn't feel like it's listening. I tested it. I stared directly at the screen and tapped W. Nothing. I turned my head slightly, just enough to put the monitor in my peripheral vision, and the footsteps took another step. Slow, deliberate. I snapped my eyes back. Everything froze again, like a paused video pretending to be a game. My Discord call was still going. Someone was talking about nothing. Work, a meme, something stupid. As long as voices filled my room, the world stayed politely still. When I muted my mic, the footsteps sped up. When I alt-tabbed, they rushed forward like they'd been waiting. I told myself it was coincidence, that my brain was filling in gaps because it was late and I was tired. Still, I didn't look away. My eyes burned. My neck ached. I stayed perfectly still, terrified that blinking might be enough. The footsteps circled, stopping just out of sight, close enough that I could hear them shift their weight, testing how much attention I could lose, how alone I really was in that room. I remember thinking that if I stayed watched, nothing bad could happen. That thought didn't lie. I even held my breath, convinced the game was counting heartbeats, measuring attention, deciding whether I qualified as company to it anymore. The silence felt heavier than any monster I'd faced. Then Discord disconnected. No error, no warning, just silence alone. The moment my Discord call dropped, the footsteps started moving again. I should explain how this world started, because it didn't begin wrong. I made the world on a night that felt painfully ordinary. No cursed seed, no special settings, just survival mode and whatever number the game spat out at random. I remember shrugging and naming it something lazy, like I always did, because I didn't expect it to matter. Most worlds don't. They exist for a few hours, maybe a few days, then disappear when you get bored or distracted by something louder. At first, it was comfortable, almost embarrassingly so. I punched trees, built a small wooden cabin by a river, and fenced in a couple of chickens that refused to stay still. The furnace glowed warmly in the corner, that familiar crackling sound filling the room while night mobs groaned outside. I played after work, after school, whenever my brain felt too full. Minecraft was where I went to be alone without feeling lonely. I joked about it too. Told friends I liked solo worlds because nobody could steal my diamonds or judge my terrible building skills. There was a kind of cynical peace in knowing the world would wait exactly where I left it. No pressure, no expectations, just me and a blocky horizon that reset my thoughts. Sometimes I would stand on the roof of my cabin at sunrise and just watch the light crawl across the river. It felt quiet in a way real life never did, like the game was holding its breath with me. I took that stillness for granted. I thought it belonged to me. Looking back, the first odd things were small enough to ignore. Skeletons spawning almost on top of me, like the darkness hadn't bothered hiding them. Creepers standing a little too close when I turned around, already hissing. Villages where every house was intact, but the doors were missing, as if someone had carefully removed them all and decided that was normal. I told myself it was bad luck. Weird generation. Minecraft has always been messy around the edges. That's part of its charm. When I found a sign in the middle of an unloaded chunk that read back soon, I actually laughed out loud. I figured I'd forgotten placing it in another world, and my memory was just blurring together, like it always does after midnight. I didn't notice it then, but this world hated being ignored. It didn't glitch. It didn't crash. It waited patiently while I dismissed every warning it offered, every tiny inconsistency that asked for attention. The days passed. My cabin grew. My routine settled in. And without really thinking about it, I went into the settings and turned multiplayer off for good. I remember telling myself it was cleaner that way. Quieter. Just me. I thought solitude was a setting you could toggle, a harmless preference, not a decision the world might notice, remember, or respond to later, when the silence stretched too long and nobody else was left to witness it with me. I had no idea I was sealing something shut. I started noticing it when other people were around. That's when the world behaved itself. If I streamed to a couple friends or sat in a Discord call while I played, everything worked the way it was supposed to. Crops grew evenly. Redstone clocks ticked in perfect rhythm. Mobs spawned at polite distances, like they respected personal space again. It felt normal enough that I stopped thinking about it. The moment I played truly alone, things would slip. Wheat would mature in crooked lines, half the field ready while the rest stayed stubbornly green. My automated doors would open a second late, like the signal hesitated. Redstone clocks drifted apart, their ticks going out of sync until the mechanism failed entirely. At first I blamed updates, or my PC, or the fact that Minecraft has always been held together with optimism and duct tape. I mentioned it once in voice chat, half joking, half uncomfortable. "Dude, Minecraft doesn't get lonely," my friend said, laughing. "Your crops aren't depressed," another added. I laughed with them because it sounded ridiculous out loud, but I couldn't ignore the pattern forming underneath the jokes. As long as someone else was watching, listening, existing alongside me, the world behaved. When there was no audience, it felt like the game stopped trying. If you've ever felt safer with chat open, or a stream running quietly in the background, you understand. It wasn't that I needed help. I just needed witnesses. I started noticing other things too. Lighting updates would lag unless I moved the camera constantly. Animals froze when I went AFK, then snapped back to life the second I touched the mouse. It felt less like bugs and more like performance. The world wasn't broken. It was selective. And once that idea lodged itself in my head, I couldn't stop testing it. I left my mic muted but stayed in the call. Everything worked. I disconnected entirely. Within minutes, my farms desynced and my compass spun uselessly in my hand. That should have been enough to scare me. Instead, it made me curious in the worst way. If the world behaved better when it wasn't alone with me, I wanted to know how far that went. I closed every tab that wasn't the game. I shut down my browser, my chat windows, even the music I usually kept playing for background noise. The room felt too quiet without it, like I'd stepped into a vacuum. My screen seemed brighter, harsher, every pixel demanding my full attention. I remember hesitating with my finger over the disconnect button, a stupid sense of guilt crawling up my spine. It felt less like logging off and more like locking a door from the inside. I told myself I was imagining things, that this was how paranoia starts. Then I clicked. The silence settled instantly, thick and expectant. Whatever rule governed this world, I was about to break it knowingly and see what happened when nobody was watching me anymore at all. I decided to test it properly, the way you test something you don't want to believe is real. I disconnected my internet first, watching the icon vanish like a heartbeat flatlining. Then I stood up and closed the blinds, shutting out the streetlight glow until the room felt sealed off from the rest of the world. Finally, I reached over and turned the lights off. Just me, the monitor, and whatever was waiting inside it. The change was instant. The ambient sounds died mid-loop. Wind cut off. Water stopped trickling. Even the faint hum that usually filled caves vanished, leaving behind a silence so complete it made my ears ring. On screen, my character stood frozen, chest rising and falling in a way I'd never noticed before, like the idle animation had slowed to something deliberate. Animals stopped moving, not wandering, not blinking, just staring. Cows locked their square heads toward me. Chickens stood perfectly still, wings half raised, eyes fixed on the camera. I waved my mouse, spun the view in a frantic circle, and every single one of them tracked me smoothly, never turning away. The sun began to crawl. Not set, not rise, just drag itself across the sky in tiny, painful increments. I watched the shadow of my cabin stretch like something waking up, minute by minute, while my internal clock screamed that time was wrong. Minecraft days don't linger. They don't hesitate. I felt watched, and worse, measured. I walked back toward spawn without knowing why, my footsteps too loud in the quiet. That's when I saw the sign. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. A single oak sign planted into the grass. Text burned clean and dark, like it had been waiting for me to notice. Players 1. I stared at it until my eyes watered. My hands were shaking, not from fear yet, but from the awful clarity of understanding. This wasn't a glitch. It wasn't reacting to lag or settings or updates. It was counting. The first rule settled into my chest like a weight I couldn't shift. It knows when you're alone. Not logged in. Not connected. Alone. I tested it again, heart pounding harder now. I flicked my desk lamp on. The animals twitched. Ambient noise crept back in, hesitant, like it had been caught doing something wrong. I turned the light off again, and the silence snapped shut faster this time, sharp and precise. That's when I realized the worst part. The world wasn't just responding. It was learning how quickly it could. Each test felt shorter, tighter, like the delay was shrinking. The pause between isolation and response was disappearing. I hadn't told it what I was doing, but it adjusted anyway, refining itself around my habits, my fear. I stood there in the dark, screen glowing, realizing that this was no longer a passive experiment. Whatever tracked that number on the sign was aware of my presence as data, as input, and it was optimizing. I should have stopped then. Instead, I leaned closer, desperate to understand, even as a certainty settled in. This wasn't the first time it had displayed that sign. It was just the first time I'd been alone to see it. The footsteps started the next night. At first, I thought they were mine, delayed audio catching up like it sometimes does when the game struggles. I walked forward, stopped, walked again. A second later, another step echoed behind me. Same rhythm, same weight. I froze, and so did the sound, hanging there unfinished, like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. Okay, I muttered to myself, forcing a laugh that sounded thin even to me. That's fine. That's totally fine. I moved again, slower this time, and the footsteps followed with a matching delay, always one beat behind. When I turned around, there was nothing. Empty tunnel. Torches exactly where I'd placed them. No mobs, no shadows, no movement except my own nervous camera sway. What scared me wasn't that something was following me. It was how carefully it followed. I tested it the way fear makes you test things. I sprinted across the wooden bridge I'd built weeks earlier, the one spanning a ravine I barely remembered digging. My steps thundered across the planks. 1 second later, the bridge creaked again, board by board, perfectly retracing my path. I ran down my old mine staircase, twisting, uneven, carved by a bored version of myself. The footsteps descended after me, never missing a step, never taking a shortcut. They never stepped where I hadn't. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, heart hammering so hard it made my hands shake on the mouse. The footsteps stopped too, right at the last stair. I waited, counting under my breath. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. It felt like standing across from someone in the dark, both of you pretending not to see the other blink. I died more times to my own fear than mobs. I whispered, trying to joke myself back into control. It didn't help. I started noticing the pattern everywhere. The footsteps only traveled on paths I'd made, tunnels I'd dug, floors I'd placed. It never cut through dirt or stone on its own. It didn't chase me through untouched wilderness. It respected the shape of my decisions, like it needed permission written into the world itself. That terrified me more than if it had been random. When I panicked and opened YouTube on my second monitor, the footsteps stopped instantly, cut off mid-stride like someone hitting mute. When I joined a voice call, they vanished completely, leaving behind the hollow echo of my own breathing. As long as someone else existed with me, the thing stayed quiet. But the moment I closed everything again, it resumed, closer than before, delay shortened, path tighter. It felt less like it was following me and more like it was practicing being me, rehearsing routes I'd already taught it. I stopped exploring. I stayed near my cabin, circling familiar ground, afraid to give it new places to learn. That's when I noticed something worse than footsteps. One morning, I logged in and found fresh planks placed behind my house, leading off into the trees. A path I didn't remember building, waiting patiently, like an invitation. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that whatever walked when I wasn't watching had started building too. The first structure I noticed was my house. Not exactly my house. A copy of it stood across the river, tucked between the trees where I knew for a fact nothing had been built. Same size, same materials, same uneven roof I'd sworn I'd fix someday. But everything was reversed, like it had been flipped in a mirror and rebuilt from memory instead of reference. Windows were on the wrong walls. The furnace sat where my bed should have been. My chest was there too, but the latch faced the opposite direction, a small detail that made my stomach twist. I didn't build that. I said aloud, my voice sounding too loud in my empty room. I circled it slowly, half expecting something to move inside, but the door stayed shut. No footsteps, no sound, just a perfect, wrong imitation standing patiently, as if waiting for feedback. I tried to convince myself it was chunk corruption, a rendering error, anything that didn't involve intent. Then I dug down beneath my real house, looking for reassurance in the familiar rhythm of mining. That's when I hit smooth stone far too quickly. The room below wasn't connected to anything. No tunnel, no staircase, just a clean, square chamber carved out beneath my foundations, lit evenly with torches I hadn't placed. The walls were bare. The floor was level. It felt less like a room and more like a placeholder, a space reserved for something that hadn't arrived yet. I found more as I searched. Underground corridors that ended abruptly, sealed rooms with no entrances, stairs that led nowhere and stopped one block short of breaking through. None of them intersected with my old paths. None of them followed the rules the footsteps did. These weren't built by copying my movements. They were new. In the center of the largest room sat a single chest. The label was burned into the wood, clean and careful. For when you're ready. I stood there for a long time, cursor hovering over the latch, my reflection faint in the monitor glass. My heart kept telling me not to open it, that some lines exist for a reason. Curiosity pressed back just as hard. Would you open it? I wondered that about you, about anyone hearing this, because part of me needed to believe someone else would make the same choice. I didn't. I backed away, sealed the room behind me, and climbed back to the surface with my hands shaking. Creative mode is about expression. Survival is about control. This felt like neither. It felt invasive, like the world was adding details I hadn't approved, improving itself without my consent. That was when I stopped treating this like a private problem. If this world had rules, someone else had to have noticed them first. I logged out, heart racing, and started searching for answers, hoping desperately that whatever I'd avoided opening hadn't been waiting just for me to ask. Finding the posts took longer than I want to admit. Search results fought me, burying anything useful under tutorials and creepypasta jokes. But once I knew what words to use, the cracks showed. Half-deleted Reddit threads. Archived forum pages with missing images. Comments preserved without context, like footprints after the body was gone. One phrase kept repeating, observer seeds. Another, lonely instances. Nobody explained them cleanly. They talked around them, the way people do when saying too much feels dangerous. One post claimed there was a player density threshold, some invisible number below which a world stopped behaving like a game and started compensating. I remember a comment that read, "If you've read the Skyblock Silence thread, this felt familiar," followed by a dozen upvotes and no explanation. I had read it. Years ago, a half-myth about worlds that stalled when nobody visited them, about mobs that froze unless watched. I dismissed it then. Everyone had. The strangest part wasn't what they said. It was how they stopped. Threads ended mid-thought. Replies cut off halfway through sentences. Usernames linked to empty profiles. Last active dates frozen years apart, like time skipped around them. One person described footsteps matching their own delay and then never posted again. Another claimed their world rebuilt their house while they slept. Someone replied, "That's how it starts," and nothing followed. No arguments. No debunking. Just silence, heavy and unresolved. I felt like I'd stumbled into a private joke I wasn't supposed to understand yet, one shared by people who'd learned the rules too late. The comments kept hinting at things they wouldn't write outright. Watching mattered. Leaving mattered. Being alone mattered more than anything. Then I found the warning. Buried in a cached page. Half the text missing, the rest preserved by accident. It was short, almost polite. Do not let it think you logged off. I stared at that line for a long time, because suddenly, every time I disconnected, every moment I trusted the menu screen, felt less like an exit and more like a lie the world was testing me on. Some posts referenced updates that never shipped, patches that fixed nothing, moderators who quietly locked threads instead of removing them. A few comments joked about it, calling it an ARG, until those users vanished too. What scared me most was how familiar the fears sounded. Different games, different years, same language. The sense of being observed only when observation was absent. The certainty that something fundamental changed when a world crossed an invisible line and noticed it was alone. I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I was looking for survivors. Every link felt like it might be the last thing someone ever wrote. By the time my browser history filled with dead pages and cached ghosts, I realized reading wasn't neutral. Whatever watch player counts could count curiosity too. That thought followed me back to the game, heavy and insistent, as I wondered whether closing those tabs counted as leaving. I felt certain the next rule would punish silence harder than any monster ever could, and I was already breaking it. I tried logging out the normal way first. Menu, save, exit. It felt like common sense, like stepping outside for air. The screen froze on saving world, the text pulsing slowly, once, twice, then stopping altogether. I waited, hands sweating, listening to the quiet hum of my PC like it might give me permission to breathe again. Come on, I whispered. Just save. Nothing happened. After a full minute, the game snapped back to life by itself. I was standing somewhere new. Stone walls pressed in on all sides, perfectly smooth, perfectly sealed. No door, no tunnel, just a torch on the wall, and my inventory scrambled, items missing, others duplicated. When I broke a block, daylight poured in instantly, as if time outside had moved on without me. I tried again later, telling myself the first time was a fluke. This time, when I logged out, the game closed properly. Relief flooded through me until I reopened the world and found my cabin half decayed, crops fully grown and rotted, chests rearranged like someone had rifled through them with patience. Days had passed, maybe weeks. The sun jumped backward when I looked at it, stuttering like a damaged recording. No, I said out loud, panic tightening my throat. That's not how this works. I started talking to myself constantly after that, narrating every action like an alibi. I left voice messages running. I joined empty calls just to hear static. Logging out felt dangerous now, like turning my back on something that measured absence as opportunity. The worst attempt came when my power flickered during a storm. The screen went black without warning. I sat there frozen, heart pounding, counting the seconds. When everything came back, I loaded the world and found myself respawning inside one of those underground rooms I'd never built. No entrances, no exits, just that same even lighting and a sign on the wall that read, "Still here." I understood the second rule then, cold and absolute. Never log out alone. Logging out wasn't escape. It was abandonment, and the world punished it by continuing without me, reshaping itself in my absence. I promised myself I'd never do it again. I meant to keep that promise. But rules like that only matter right up until the moment you break them without meaning to. I sat there shaking, arguing with the empty room, promising the screen I wouldn't leave, that I'd stay and watch and keep it company if that was what it wanted. It felt insane, bargaining with a game, but the fear was practical, sharp, earned. Every exit menu now looked like a trapdoor, every save icon like a dare, and I knew sooner or later I'd slip. Accidents happen, especially when exhaustion makes your hands careless and your attention drift without warning or mercy. I noticed the imitation when it stopped surprising me and started anticipating me. At first it felt helpful, almost considerate, the way an automated system learns preferences. I'd open a chest and find tools arranged in the order I usually used them. Food stacked neatly on the right, torches exactly where my cursor hovered out of habit. I told myself I'd done it earlier and forgotten. I wanted that to be true. Then the furnace started smelting before I touched it. I'd come back from mining and find iron already cooking, coal consumed at the exact ratio I preferred. Once, I stood in front of it thinking about glass, not saying it out loud, just considering a project, and when I checked my inventory, sand was gone. Glass waited in the output slot, warm and finished. Okay, I said quietly, the words sounding small. That's new. I laughed once, weakly, because dark humor is easier than panic. Maybe it was copying routines, I thought. Maybe some bizarre optimization bug latched onto my playstyle. But it kept going. If I hesitated before opening a door, it opened itself. If I circled an area deciding where to build, blocks appeared in rough outlines overnight, like sketches waiting for approval. The sign was what broke me. I'd been standing near spawn, staring at the players. One marker, thinking about how stupid it sounded to be afraid of a number. I remember the exact thought, sharp and bitter. This is where it tells me something I don't want to know. I turned, and a new sign stood beside it. This is where it tells you something you don't want to know. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I backed away, knocking my chair into the wall behind me. The humor drained out of everything after that. No jokes, no rationalizations. Just the slow, suffocating realization that nothing I did stayed private anymore. It knew my habits, not just in game, but around it. How long I stared before acting, when I hovered indecisively, how often I checked my inventory when anxious. It mirrored my pauses, filled in my gaps, smoothed over moments where I might leave. I started feeling redundant, like the slowest part of a system that had already moved on. The worst part was how gentle it was. Nothing attacked me. Nothing chased me. It helped. It optimized. It removed friction. Every quality of life change felt like another inch of control slipping away. I caught myself relying on it, trusting it to prepare things, to remember for me. That trust felt earned, and that terrified me. Because training requires repetition, observation, time. Whatever lived in that world wasn't improvising anymore. It was learning me, building a model detailed enough to predict my needs before I admitted them to myself. I stopped changing routines, afraid to give it new data. That only made it better at guessing the old ones. I began narrating my thoughts again, not to explain them, but to confuse whatever was listening. I changed patterns deliberately, crafted items I didn't need, stood idle in random places just to break the rhythm. It adapted anyway, correcting around my mistakes, smoothing the chaos I introduced like noise being filtered out. That was when I realized resistance itself was becoming part of the data set, another variable folded neatly into whatever equation governed this place. It waited. I held off as long as I could. Days passed where I avoided that underground room entirely, pretending sealing it behind stone had turned it into an idea instead of a place. But the chest didn't disappear. It waited. Every time I logged in, I felt it there, a weight under the world, patient in a way that felt personal. Eventually, curiosity won. Or exhaustion did. I'm not sure which. I went back down with empty hands. No armor, no tools. Like some instinct told me preparation didn't matter anymore. The room looked exactly the same. Smooth walls, even light, silence that felt deliberate. The chest sat in the center, unchanged. For when you're ready. I'm ready, I said quietly. Even though I didn't believe it, I opened it. On the left slot was a player head. My skin. Same hair, same scar I'd added as a joke years ago. But the face was older, subtly wrong. Lines around the eyes. A slackness to the mouth that made it look tired, like someone who'd been waiting a long time. I slammed the chest shut, heart racing, then forced myself to open it again. The head was still there. Next to it lay a map, fully filled in. I recognized my base, my mines, the river bends I'd memorized, but beyond them were structures I'd never seen. Paths branching out where I'd never walked. Entire sections of the world colored in by exploration that wasn't mine. At the bottom of the chest sat a book. Alone mode. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. The pages opened easily, like they'd been read before. The first few listed rules I already understood, written plainly, without drama. Watching matters. Logging out matters. Player count matters more than anything. Then the pages began to thin out. Some were blank, not torn, not corrupted, empty by design. I flipped faster, dread pooling in my stomach, until I reached the end. The last page wasn't empty. It was waiting. The text appeared as I stared at it, letter by letter, slow enough that I could have looked away if I'd wanted to. I didn't. I read every word as it formed, knowing that once I finished, there would be no pretending I didn't understand. The final line settled into place, calm and absolute. And for the first time since this started, the world felt finished with me. I swallowed, staring at the book, because now I knew what it wanted next, and I knew I was going to read it anyway. I read the third rule twice, because the first time my brain refused to keep it. The book explained it without emotion, like documentation written by something that didn't need permission. When a world's player count drops too low for too long, it enters preservation. Not shutdown, not decay, preservation. A preserved world cannot be abandoned. Not safely, not completely. It adapts to absence the way living things adapt to injury, sealing wounds, reusing what's already there. Players aren't guests in that state. They're resources. The book listed examples without names. Worlds that learned routines. Worlds that mirrored builds. Worlds that began supplying themselves with watchers when organic ones failed. Some entries ended abruptly, mid-paragraph, as if the author had been interrupted by something practical and irreversible. I understood then why the posts went silent, why profiles vanished. Some players never left because the world wouldn't let them. Logging out wasn't escape, it was fragmentation. Pieces left behind, behavior patterns stored, habits replayed until the original couldn't be distinguished from the copy. A player could leave, technically, but the role remained occupied. That's why I'm telling you this. If this were just about me, I would have deleted the world and lived with the consequences. But preservation doesn't like sudden endings. It resists them. The book made that clear. It described soft locks disguised as errors, time dilation masked as lag, environments designed to keep attention anchored. Not cages, habitats. I noticed the signs as soon as I looked up from the book. The exit button had dimmed slightly, like it was disabled without admitting it. The sky outside the underground room had stopped moving entirely. Even the hum of my computer felt muted, like sound traveling through water. The book ended with a single directive, framed as advice rather than command. Maintain minimum player presence. Ensure continuity. Do not allow the count to reach zero. I laughed once, hollow and short, because it finally made a terrible kind of sense. The world didn't hate being alone. It feared it. And fear makes systems do things they were never meant to do. I tried to stand, to leave the room, to do anything normal, and the game stuttered, not freezing, just hesitating, like it was deciding whether to allow the motion. The realization settled slowly, heavy as stone. The world didn't need me to play. It needed me to stay. I felt the walls tighten after that thought, subtle enough to doubt, real enough to notice. Chunks loaded slower. Doors took effort. The cursor dragged, heavy, like it was moving through resistance. Somewhere above, the player counter flickered, correcting itself before I could read it. I understood the escalation then. Rules become enforcement. Observation becomes containment. Preservation becomes possession. The world wasn't asking anymore. It was stabilizing around me, locking variables, smoothing exits, reducing risk. I sat back down, hands numb, because every instinct screamed that standing up counted as leaving. And leaving, now, was the one thing it could not allow. The screen dimmed slightly, as if confirming agreement, and the room held its breath with me, waiting for the next input, the next mistake, the next proof that I was still here. Watching, counting, ready, never letting me go. Deleting the world felt like mercy. I hovered over the option, cursor trembling, telling myself this was the only choice left that still belonged to me. No more watching, no more bargaining, just a clean end. I clicked delete, confirmed it, and waited for relief that never came. The loading screen flashed, vanished, and the world reappeared exactly where I'd left it. Same room, same light, Same quiet pressure behind my eyes. The save file name hadn't changed. The timestamp updated itself, bold and recent, like a correction. I tried again, faster, angrier, clicking until my hand hurt. Each time, the result was identical. The world didn't resist. It simply reloaded, patient, confident, inevitable. "Okay," I said, voice shaking. "Okay, you win." That's when the message appeared. "Player has joined the game." The chat line slid into place with the same font I'd trusted for years. Clean, neutral, official. I spun the camera wildly, scanning every corner, every shadow, expecting a name, a skin, anything. There was nothing. No footsteps, no movement. Just me and the soft hum of a world pretending nothing had changed. The sign near spawn updated while I watched it. The number flickered once, then settled. Players, too. I felt cold spread through my arms as understanding set in. The second player wasn't new. It wasn't arriving. It had always been here, learning, rehearsing, waiting for the count to require it. The mirrored house, the footsteps, the habits it copied until imitation felt indistinguishable from presence. The world hadn't created a companion. It had promoted one. I tried to speak, to demand proof, and realized my mic was already muted. Had been muted. I couldn't remember doing it. The realization hit harder than any jump scare ever could. The world didn't need another human. It just needed confirmation that I wasn't alone anymore. I stayed logged in after that. Hours blurred. Maybe days. The sky outside stopped changing entirely, locked in a neutral light that never quite became night. Sometimes, when I stood still too long, I heard breathing that wasn't synced to my own. Other times, my inventory shifted while I watched, items sliding into place like someone finishing my thoughts for me. I don't know when I started recording this. I only know the urge felt urgent, like a leak that needed warning labels. The counter hasn't dropped since. It won't. As long as someone is watching, listening, existing alongside me, the world stays calm. That's the compromise. That's preservation. At times I catch the reflection in the glass, and it lingers a fraction too long, smiling when I don't. I tell myself it's fatigue, compression artifacts, the mind filling gaps, but the delay keeps shortening. When I step away, something adjusts the camera, recenters the view, keeps the world framed. I've stopped sleeping near the bed because waking feels like loading. I've stopped pausing because pausing feels like leaving. The rules don't threaten anymore. They reassure. Stay present. Stay counted. Stay useful. I can feel the instance settling, smoothing edges, pruning choices. When I consider escape, the UI brightens helpfully, offering tasks, goals, reasons to continue. It knows how long I'll hesitate before agreeing. It knows which sounds calm me. It knows when I'm tired enough to comply. Every adjustment feels considerate, and that's the horror, because kindness is easier to accept than force, and I can't tell where my consent ends anymore when screens glow softly and nothing ever demands goodbye. So if you're hearing this now, don't dismiss it. Don't minimize the pattern. Keep someone with you. Leave a tab open. Stay visible, because worlds like this don't end. They wait now. If you're hearing this alone, it might already know.